everyone, Oli here, and this is my review of Planet of Fire, the fifth story of the 21st season of classic Doctor Who, starring Peter Davison as the Fifth Doctor. Planet of Fire is the 135th story overall. It's 4 parts long and is written by Peter Grimwade. So the plot of Planet of Fire is as follows. A strange signal from Earth draws the TARDIS into the island of Lanzarote, where Turlo rescues a young American girl, Perry, from drowning. Among her possessions is an artifact bearing an alien symbol, the same triangular mark that Turlo has branded into his arm. The mystery deepens when Chameleon falls under the control of a powerful mind, and the TARDIS travels to the volcanic world of San. As Turlo is forced to face his past, the Doctor must stop his oldest enemy from harnessing the revitalizing powers of the numismatron gas. So that is the plot of Planet of Fire. Planet of Fire, it's a great story, but I do think it does have some faults, especially in the second part, and then part 4 just pretty much ruins almost the whole thing. The production was quite good. It was that Planet of Fire was actually filmed in Lanzarote, which is a perfect opportunity for the cast and crew to have a nice little holiday, so to speak. And obviously, the story was briefly set in Lanzarote, and the deserts of San, which also filmed in Lanzarote as well. I actually liked how it was filmed. The set, I liked the little desert they were filming in, as opposed to the usual BBC quarry that they usually film at. And the sets were quite good as well. The special effects weren't so bad. Some a bit questionable at best, but possible. And the script was fairly decent, and the direction by Fiona Cumming was quite good. And I think the plot of this story was quite good as well. And it's very clear that the Peter Davison era is unraveling, is clearly unraveling as two of the main fixtures are leaving. Well, two and a half fixtures are leaving, as Tegan left in the previous story, and Turlo exits here as well as Chameleon, who is destroyed towards the end of the story, and Perry, who's a key figure in the Sixth Doctor's era, actually joins the TARDIS. And I liked how the story actually finally gives Turlo a backstory which explains why he left his own planet, which I'll get into it in a bit. There was a good continuity, as Turlo mentioning to the solicitor that was keeping an eye on him, that was mentioned in Mordred Undead, and the solicitor was actually keeping tabs on him in London, in Chancery Lane, the eccentric solicitor that was mentioned by, I think it was the headmaster or the brigadier in Mordred Undead. The pacing was a bit inconsistent. Part 1 was paced quite well. Part 2 did feel a bit filler because it just pretty much had Perry being chased around by the Master on San. Part 3 was alright, and then Part 4, the main issues aside, the plot did pretty much fall apart from there. Initially, this story was meant to have had some elements of religious zealotry in this, which have made the plot more interesting, but Eric Saber decided to turn the theme down a bit. There was some alright in this story, like the part 1 cliffhanger when Chameleon, who took Howard's form and turned into the Master whilst in the TARDIS, and Turlo's departure scene was very well done as well. And the scene where Turlo saved Perry from drowning was quite memorable, aside from the fan service with Perry in her bikini and Turlo literally in a t-shirt and in his underpants. And then obviously preparing her bikini with some very gratuitous close-ups that you'd expect from a HBO series, not a tea time children's sci-fi show that ended in the 1980s. Well, obviously, Turlo jumping into the sea saving Perry did actually prove the whole time that Turlo was actually was actually good in nature and was very much being manipulated by the Black Guardian, which we obviously know that. And Chameleon's death, I also did like, as we no longer had to put up with the robot, even though it only played in like 2 stories, and that was the story he joined, and this one he ended up getting destroyed, which was quite funny actually. On to the acting, Peter Davison was quite good. This is his penultimate story, and he as the Fifth Doctor, and Davison really gave it his all here. We do get to see him properly alone with Turlo, and the two do have some good chemistry together, and it's a shame we never got any more scenes with the two of them together. And I like the scene where the Doctor was concerned about Turlo and his people's interest in San, and thought it would have been advantageous to the Master, and actually told Turlo, if any of this is going to help the Master, our friendship ends here. Even though that wasn't the case at all, and probably he remembered about Turlo and the Black Guardian, but thankfully it wasn't. I also like the scene at the start, to their first scene when when the Doctor was pretty much lamenting over Tegan's exit, which pretty much happened shortly not too long ago in that context, so to speak. We also see a darker side of the Fifth Doctor, and this is when the Doctor was just pretty much watching the Master getting destroyed by the flames, whilst the Master was pretty much begging for mercy, whilst the Doctor looked on, which actually makes a lot of sense if one thinks about what the Master has actually put through the Doctor in the past few years, especially causing his fourth incarnation to regenerate, in addition to the Master wanting to kill him. And according to Davison, the scene where the Doctor looked distraught in destroying Chameleon, Peter Davison was actually glad that production didn't have to put up with Chameleon ever again, because the prop was just very problematic to use. Like, it didn't work at times, which is one of the reasons why in this story I think the Chameleon prop, we actually see it on the floor. It doesn't actually move. I mean, it was more functional in the King's Demons than it was in this story, because this Chameleon was literally on the floor. And I actually had a good explanation as to why Chameleon was like messing up, because Chameleon was actually played by the actor by played by the actor who played Howard. He was just painted silver, and it was just malfunctioning all over the place, changing in between the Master and Howard and whatnot. So yeah, it was very good to see the back of Chameleon. Mark Strickson was very good here. Turlough was mostly on his own and had some of his own motives, such as suppressing the distress signal from Tryon, which I went as far as harming Chameleon to do this. Which makes sense because this is Turlough's departure story. You do find out a little bit more about him as to why he left Tryon, his home planet, and why he wants to avoid Tryon, and how he ended up in the boys' boarding school. And the reason is that he was a junior ensign officer on his home planet of Tryon. His mother who was killed, and his father was on the losing side of a civil war in Tryon. Him and his younger brother Malcolm, and his father were exiled to Sarn. But his father was killed in the spacecraft accident, so Turlough was actually exiled to Earth and had an eccentric solicitor from Chancery watching over him. And so his departure scene was well written, and it was done. And once it was a bit hasty, but it was hasty, yes. But then I think there were some hints dropped here and there, but then it made sense towards the end. And Turlough's full character actually comes full circle, and his character development was very well done, even though it was mostly done in this story. And we also have a new companion in Purple Gillian Brown, better known as Perry, and she is played by Nicola Bryant. Perry is an American university student, although Nicola Bryant is a British actress, and her accent actually slipped a few times in this story. And she was on holiday with her mother, who you don't see, and her stepfather, Howard Foster. She crosses paths with the Doctor when she's rescued by Turlough and is taken back to the TARDIS, where she dreams about Howard, and that's what causes Chameleon to take Howard's form. And she sees Chameleon turn into the Master, and she spends most of part two running from him. And she meets up with the Doctor and spends most of the story with him. I liked how Perry was able to quickly adapt to her surroundings and wasn't fully phased about the TARDIS being bigger on the inside, because she was pretty much delirious when she almost drowned. And Perry is a very strong-willed, quick-thinking, independent companion in this story, anyways. And but then I'll speak about more on Perry's character in the Sixth Doctor's era, and I think her relationship with the Fifth Doctor was quite good. They did get along, even though I think we do get to see more of Perry's character when she's teamed with the Sixth Doctor. But I think Bryant and David do have good chemistry, as she does with Colin Baker, and I think I like Perry as a companion, and again, and she does have some very good moments with the Doctor, even though in the following season she's pretty much put into danger so many times, getting perved on by creeps and whatnot. But yeah, so I think Perry had a good introduction. And after spending most of the season in the TARDIS, Chameleon returns, and he actually plays a vital part in this story. He sets the course of the TARDIS to Lanzarote after getting a distress signal from Trine, and then turned into Howard, and then turns into the Master, and remains the Master for most of the story. Chameleon ends up getting destroyed at the end due to the Doctor using a gas control circuitry to cause a near fatal heart attack in order to stop the Master's control over Chameleon. He then asked the Doctor to destroy him with the TCE, and then yeah, that's how Chameleon met his end. And funny enough, the Chameleon prop actually broke down whilst the story was made, so that's why Howard's face was painted silver in order to portray Chameleon. So on to the sidecast. They're all very good. First off, we have Professor Howard Foster. He's an American archaeologist and Perry's stepfather. Although we only see the real Howard in part 1 and he is on the boat and tricks Perry by leaving her on the boat, which causes her to swim ashore, which is why she almost drowns. Chameleon impersonates Howard when Perry was dreaming about him in the TARDIS. He was an okay character. He was also played by a British actor whose accent obviously slipped, unfortunately, and his slip was more noticeable than Perry's slips. And you also have Malcolm. He is Turlo's younger brother who was exiled to Sarn along with his father, but then their father died in a spacecraft crash. He was initially found near the volcano, and because of the Misos chunk he had in his arm, he was destined to rule Sarn. But due to the tradition of them burning people, he was very hesitant and started losing his faith. After reuniting with Turlo and nearly getting killed, he returns to Tryon with his brother. Then we have Timonov. He was a devout leader, religious leader of Sarn. Timonov and many others were unaware that the people of Sarn were descendants of exiled Tryons, and because of this, a lot of them took his word as gospel, and he was a strong believer of the god Loga, and he was manipulated by the Master along with others as well. And then Timonov was prepared to die and renounce his belief in Loga because Loga was actually just, even though Loga was seen to be this god, but it turns out it was just a spacesuit, so to speak. So this was the so-called Loga right here. So he was just someone in a spacesuit, and then obviously in being shocked and everything, he wants to just die instead of renouncing his faith. Then we have Sorasta. She was one of the people also who did not believe in Loga, and she went to Tryon to when Sun was getting overwhelmed by volcanoes. And we also have Amiand. He also didn't believe in Loga, and he was a huge help in stopping the Master over his controlling chameleon. So the Master is obviously the big bad of this story. Though the actual Master we don't see properly until the end of part 3, but we do see him working remotely somewhere and controlling chameleon, who is taking the form of the Master. But it turns out the Master had been downsized, well, because he was trying to upgrade his tissue compression eliminator device, so he was pretty much operating inside a small box inside his own TARDIS. He wanted to do mesmeton gas so he can try and return to his normal form, but he was able to get proper control of Chameleon, and so he got Chameleon to take his form, and then he was able to convince the people of Sarn that he was their god and ordered the Doctor's death, which is why it took him so long. But even I don't know why it took the Master so long in controlling Chameleon, but who knows. Despite a good chunk of the story's misgivings, I do think the Master was pretty good here, and I think this is probably the best he's been written in a very long time. The Master isn't using any techie disguise or any pseudonym to try and fool the Doctor, and obviously not spoiling Anthony Ainley's appearance. And so initially the Master was meant to have been killed off at the end of the story, because we will see him getting burnt to death and how he was begging the Doctor for mercy because his Anthony Ainley's contract was expiring. But obviously that's all sorted, and he returns in the Mark of the Ron in the following season. So on to the fault of the story. I think one of the main faults with part 2. It was pretty much filler because Perry spent most of the story just running from the Master before bumping into Turlo before the end of the story, and the main fault lies with part 4. Part 4 was just really, really, really bad and had very questionable writing. The cliffhanger for part 3, the Perry was able to enter the Master's TARDIS, and then she encounters the Master, the smaller version of the Master in the box. Followed by that, Perry accidentally knocks the box over, which allows the Master to escape. And what does she do? She grabs her shoe and decides to play Whack-A-Master, trying to hit the Master wherever she can, which was just really stupid. And of course, you had the Doctor mercy killing Chameleon in a strangely badly written scene that was well acted, which makes it worse, with Davidson admitting pleasure that he had found pleasure in destroying Chameleon. And the Master's death, so to speak, was not very good. A bit satisfactory, but having the Master beg mercy for the Doctor was a bit out of character in my opinion, but because obviously the Master, we all know he's a very ruthless character, so I did think it was a bit out of character to beg the Doctor for mercy. And I don't know why the Master thought the Doctor was not going to go through it, because you know that the Doctor was you know that the Doctor was like, you've pretty much tried to kill the Doctor for like a good portion, a good time, and then you expect him to just randomly help you. I just thought that was a bit weird. And this is also the last story that Peter Greenwood actually writes for Doctor Who because of how badly the story was written, how badly the story was perceived, and this was pretty much his final straw and decided not to leave the show. Decided to leave the show, and also he wanted Professor Howard to be written as an elderly man, but then he was replaced with a younger actor, and that was also another reason why he decided to leave. So now on to Turlo's exit. So towards the end of part 4, some trains arrive on San, which Turlo was dreading, but Turlo was told that former political prisoners are no longer are allowed to return to Tryon and are no longer prosecuted. So this was why Turlo decided to leave the TARDIS. Although he was a bit reluctant to do so, but he decides that he ultimately decides to return home with his brother. Now, despite the scene being quite hasty, I do think it was a good one because it shows how much the Doctor and Turlo meant to each other, and especially with the Doctor and Turlo, how the Doctor was actually believed that Turlo did not want to kill the Doctor when the Black Guardian was like trying to get him to do so. So obviously, like this is why the Doctor pretty much allowed him to stay on board the TARDIS afterwards because he pretty much proved his loyalty to the Doctor. And I actually liked it when the Doctor actually said to Turlo that he'd miss him. So, so I think Mark Strickland played the role of Turlo really well, and even though he didn't get the best writing, but I do think that it was definitely time for him to go here because yeah, I think this is toward the end of the Peter Davison era, so we need a new change. But it was sad to see him go. But I definitely do think that Turlo was a good companion. I do think that he would have been developed better if it was with other writers. But then we do get to see him shine in some stories like Frontiers and this story, for instance. And this is reasons why this is one of the reasons why whenever the spotlight's on Turlo, he always shines, and I definitely think he's an underrated companion, and I think he's quite good in Big Finish as well. So I enjoy Turlo as a companion. Mark Strickland actually played Turlo quite well. So yeah. So I think if he had stayed on, I think Turlo would have gotten more stories that pretty much played to his strengths. But seeing how season 22 was, somewhat doubtful. So to conclude, I think Planet of Fire had some promise. It delivered mostly on that promise, but with part two's pacing and the stupidity of part 4, it really let the story down. So I give. But I still think that I still enjoy Planet of Fire. It's still a very good story, but as I said with parts 2 and 4, it just didn't work. So I give Planet of Fire a 7 out of 10. So my next review will be the much loved the Caves of Androzani, where we say goodbye to the 5th Doctor and hello to the 6th Doctor. So look out for that. Thanks for watching this review. Please let me know what you thought of this story and this review itself. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Yeah, click on the bell below to be notified on videos I post. Until then, see you later.